Welcome to the Holy Smokes Podcast, a show about faith, friendship, fine tobacco, and drink. I'm Steve Reiter in Papa P's Smoke Shop and Lounge in Franklin, Tennessee, and I'm with Paul Cardall.
Yeah.
Paul, thanks for being on, my man.
Hey, honored to be here. Love Papa P's.
So, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Salt Lake City.
Really?
Salt Lake City, so just on the other side of the mountains. Yeah.
It's a beautiful town.
It is. The mountains is what makes it gorgeous.
Yeah.
You know, there's days where, people will fly in, and maybe that's a one stop for people that are on Delta or some other airline, and they'll either see it as gorgeous on a clear day, or they'll go in and it'll just look like just a disgusting, like there's a big salt lake, and it's like, so you have to kind of be there on certain periods of the year to go, wow, this is fascinating. This is really beautiful.
Yeah, my late wife's great aunt and uncle lived there, and so we'd usually stop in, especially if we were going to Northern California, we'd swing down, say hi. Sometimes we go out of our way if we're going down to Southern California and spend a night or two, and we got a little familiar with the town.
Yeah, it's people go to Utah because you've got the 5 major national parks within 6 hours. You get up to Yellowstone, you can get down to Zion's, you can get over to Mesquite if you want to gamble a little bit. As a kid, we'd have to go to Evanston, Wyoming to buy fireworks, and so it's a beautiful place. But my ancestors actually were the ones that settled it.
Really?
Built it.
Really?
And run it.
Really? Talk about that.
Because
we were talking genealogy a little bit before we started recording.
Genealogy is fascinating. Yeah, we were talking about that because it's one of the things that I think that people should look into, because it gives us a good explanation of the generational trauma and how we see ourselves in a line of people that have come and gone, and now here we are. It's our time. What are we going to do with it? Soon it'll be passed down through the posterity. But I was born into a strong Mormon family. So, of course, Mormons today, there's 400 different breakoffs from the original church.
Really?
There's about 400 breakoffs.
Wow. I did not know that. I always thought it was just, you hear on the news once in a while, this group that went down to Mexico to keep polygamy a thing.
That's Mitt Romney's clan. Those are his people. Yeah, but my great-grandmother, Ruth Taylor, her grandfather, John, was the 3rd president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He was in the Carthage jail when the founder of the Mormon faith, Joseph Smith, was murdered by the Carthage Greys, an organized militia supported by Governor Ford of Illinois, approved by James K. Polk. Joseph Smith, who was running for president of the United States, privately practicing polygamy, and a lot of the men who were totally offended by that brought it out into the open, tried to expose him, and that led to him going to the jail. And my great-grandmother's grandfather, John Taylor, was there to support him, and he got several musket bullets into him. And, of course, Joseph Smith died. Hiram Smith, the brother, or a second elder of the faith, died. And then all of the men that Joseph Smith called by the authority of the Melchizedek priesthood, which he believed he'd received from Peter, James, and John, gave it to 12 men, 12 apostles, sent them to Europe to start converting people to come gather in Zion. So,
Yeah.
so this is about 1830.
Mm-hmm.
In 1830, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams had just passed away 4 years earlier on July 4th. And so this is that time period. So the British were still technically considered the enemy. And yet my ancestors, John Taylor, Brigham Young,
Yeah.
they all went to Europe and started bringing people to Illinois. And as a result, when Joseph died, Brigham Young, who kind of was the president over those missions, those ministries, took charge. And majority of the people left with him and, left the United States to go to Mexican territory.
In Utah.
Which became the Utah Territory, and the rest is history. And now there's 17 of Brigham Young's church, which became the corporate LDS faith that we know today that Mitt Romney was from. Harry Reid was from that. Steve Young, quarterback of the 49ers. And of course, Donnie and Marie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go in a nutshell.
What kind of kid were you growing up?
Oh, I was probably rather obnoxious. How many siblings did you have?
2 younger brothers.
Okay, so I had 8. There were 8. So there were 4 girls, 4 boys. This was your typical.
What number were you in the birth
Catholic
order?
Oh, I'm 5.
Okay.
No, yeah. Yeah, I'm 4. 4. I have 3 older sisters.
Yeah.
And, you're either Catholic or Mormon and have big a family. So we had the big family. And it was great. Of course, it's all you know.
Yeah.
But I was very fortunate because my mother and father worked well together. They ran it well. Dad was always at church doing his ministry. At one time, even though he was professionally a broadcast journalist in charge of reporting religious activity in the state of Utah and around the country, mainly pertaining to the LDS Church, he at one time was the bishop of the ward, which is a British term for the parish. So Mom was kind of left to make sandwiches and dinner, and so it was a typical traditional home. It was beautiful, and they taught us to love the Lord, that we each have a purpose, and that miracles continue to take place. And because I had been born with congenital heart disease, I had surgery as an infant, and then again at age 13, open heart surgery for an infection, and then a year later, reconstructive surgery, because I had only had a single functioning ventricle, and I needed to keep living, so they figured out how to create a right atrium. And so I was raised in the environment of Jesus is the master physician, and through men and women, he performs miracles. So I was raised with the appreciation for Christ, the healer, and also that the pressure, because my life's experience was kind of like the teaching moment among all my siblings, and like that God, does miracles. But when you have one sick child, the others kind of feel a little neglected. Not that that's the intent of the parents.
No.
But it's very challenging for the siblings.
How did your siblings handle it?
Well, I think, you basically survive and adapt. They're all very successful.
Yeah.
But I know today there are elements of confusion about our childhood, but I think that's just everybody trying to work through their past and,
Yeah.
Where was mom during this, or where was dad during this? But my parents, they did the best they could, and the fact that they remained married nearly 70 years is a true love story.
Yeah.
So not everybody gets that.
Yeah.
I may have had a crappy, childhood with my heart defect and surgeries, but to have parents who I never saw fight.
Yeah.
They disagreed. But, dad would go to work, mom would kiss him before he goes, and then he'd come home, we'd have dinner. It was, the beaver and the cleavers. It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, no complaints.
How was it for you growing up with this heart condition?
Yeah, I didn't know anything else.
Yeah.
But, you go to the pool and you have to take your shirt off, you got scar. Because most people don't recognize congenital heart disease is the number one birth defect. It's the number one cause of infant-related deaths. It's the most, even though it's the number one cause, it's the least funded of all the major. So unless you take your shirt off, you don't see it. Maybe a kid, you can see a little purple lips, a little less pale, maybe a little, looks like they're malnutritioned under the eyes, but they're not, there isn't the attention to it. But, and so I thought at the time I was the only one. My parents, we just assumed there was one doctor and it was for me. And once a year I'd go in and they'd treat me like an anesthetized frog, poking, prodding, trying to figure out how I'm doing. But they were always pessimistic about my future.
Really?
Yeah.
What did that do to you as a kid? How did you internalize that?
My life, and I think for many with chronic illness, death is a daily thought. That I might die. And that's been a thought in my mind for 51 years.
Wow.
I might die. I might die. But time and time again, like a cat, I've had 9 lives. I don't know what number I'm on now, but I'm well beyond 12 or 13. So I'm testing that theory.
Yeah.
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 So, what did you do after high school?
After high school, in high school, a friend of mine who played piano passed away, and that led me to the living room where my parents had a piano. I hadn't really played since I took lessons for 6 months as a kid, and I was pounding on the piano, my frustration that he died. You see, I had a scar on my chest. I'd been born with complexities, and my dad spent a fortune paying the medical bills, and out of nowhere, my perfectly healthy friend dies. So I'm pounding on the piano, confused, asking God, this doesn't make sense. Some people are warned, and some people are not. And then I hit a couple notes, and the tone of those notes, it was like God pouring into, it was like a warm blanket was wrapped around me on a cold day. And I could feel God assure me everything was okay. So playing the piano, I discovered I could create music and start composing. So I was playing piano every day. So right after high school, I got asked to, somebody actually asked me to play in their restaurant. So the fact that anyone would want to listen to the music was like, and that's kind of, we have our gifts and they start to pop up and people start to kind of confirm those gifts that we have. And that's what gives us our purpose to. So I was playing the piano, but because I come from the Mormon background, it was my responsibility to go on a mission. So I did a 2-year LDS mission in San Bernardino, California. And so that's what I did after high school.
San Bernardino.
The armpit of California. The first city to go bankrupt. So that'll tell you that there was a lot of poverty and people needed help. And I think most people think of Mormon missionaries as the guys that are constantly knocking on the doors, in the suit and ties and trying to get you to join the church. But I spent probably half my time which Mormon missionaries do, in the inner city helping kids learn how to read.
Really?
At a rest home, reading to elderly people, working at the little ice cream store in the rest home, giving people their ice cream. Joe Biden would have been in there every single day. But so there's a lot of community service, so it really shapes the character of young people that choose to go out and serve. And I don't think it matters if it's, if you're Mormon, that's what so you should go do that. It kills the ego. Mm-hmm. Because you become so I need my parents' help, I need this, I need that. You start to recognize right off the bat. And I don't have time to go to college and be tempted to party. Some people get it out of their system in college, and some people get it out of their system later in life. But the mission was, it was amazing. It's what I knew.
Yeah.
And it was incredible.
Yeah. So you're on this mission. Mm-hmm. What's next?
Oh, well, okay, we're doing the timeline.
Yeah.
I was recruited because of my experience in high school and leadership to run a community college fine arts board. They wanted to give me $1 million budget.
Whoa.
To bring in performers and whatever I could do for the community college. So I decided to take the full ride scholarship, and I got involved in the leadership and started trying to create events that would really bring culture to the campus and then really enrich the students' lives. Mm-hmm. For example, Schindler's List was new at the time, so that'll date me.
We're on the same age.
Okay. So Smells Like Teen Spirit comes out in my sophomore year. Mm-hmm. Guns N' Roses, Sweet Child of Mine, my 9th grade year. Best time to be around for music.
Oh, it was unbelievable.
Rush.
It was unbelievable.
Rush, Tom Sawyer, 1984.
Yeah.
So it's perfect. So it was great to be able to have these, people put on these presentations for the community. And it was controversial to do Schindler's List. Not because of the topic, but because it's rated R.
Oh, Lord.
So, in the LDS...
So that kind of legalism was even... I grew up Assemblies of God.
Okay, yeah.
Pentecostal
Yeah.
in the 80s.
Yeah.
That's where my parents took us to church. Very legalistic like that. I remember being... What was that? Let's see, we were probably 3rd, 4th grade. Return of the Jedi comes out in the theater.
Oh, yeah.
We're at the Burger King right next door, and we see another family from the church, and my mom's like, don't tell them we're going to a movie.
Wow. See, we weren't that strict. There were some people that were pretty strict like that.
Yeah.
Where you only see the G-rated films.
Yeah.
Even though Bambi, there's murder.
Yes.
A lot of death with those Disney characters.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was Schindler's List. It was controversial, but what I did was, with the budget, we would get a couple of the Holocaust survivors to come in and show the film and then tell us their experience.
Yeah.
So I kind of spent my college days doing that until I was still playing at the restaurants and people were asking me for a cassette. They wanted a cassette of the music. And because I kept getting asked, I was like, okay, maybe this is something I should do right now. So while going to school, I was recording music, and then that led to Virgin Records had a label called Narada.
Yeah.
Amazing New Age label. New Age, of course, was controversial later because the New Age movement kind of took it over, and about the time they did, I bailed.
Yeah.
But Narada was like the label, doing instrumental piano music, and they signed me to do 2 albums.
And you're playing gigs in Utah at the community college, or were you still in California?
No, I'd come home from California after 2 years and gone to the college.
Okay, so you're playing gigs around Utah.
Yeah, I'm playing.
Are you playing outside of Utah?
Because at the time I was strong in the LDS faith, I would speak in different churches. So I would go out and perform and share a message.
Yeah.
So I couldn't from the pulpit say I have music available. Because they told me there's a tax implication there. They might be, because it's a corporate church, it's not a nonprofit.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's a corporation.
Huh.
Yeah. If it's a nonprofit, you always have to be begging for money and you usually don't have a lot. When you're a corporate church, it's a built-in system and you always have what you need.
Yeah.
It's just expected of you.
Yeah.
So in my situation, I was not allowed to say I have an album, but the idea was I hope that go out by performing and sharing the message, and I was going to outside of Utah all over the place, that people would want an album.
Yeah.
They'd go buy a CD, and you trust in God that, I'm going to, because in that faith, you're making deals with God. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do this and this, but I need you to do this and this.
Yeah.
And that mentality is kind of, I need to do this and you bless me, Lord.
Transactional.
So it's like he's a third-party administrator of your happiness and success. And I don't think, not all Latter-day Saints think like that, but because before you go on a Mormon mission, you're supposed to go to the temple. And then the temple is where you get endowed. So the idea refers back to when Moses went up to the mount and saw the face of God and comes down and wants to give the 70 that experience. But because they had built an idol, he couldn't give them what God said, bring them up. He couldn't bring them up. So the idea of an endowment is that God wants to bring his people into the temple. So it's a continuation of the old law of going to a temple. And instead of offering up the lamb, you're offering a broken heart and contrite spirit. So Jesus is not the temple. The temple is a place for Jesus to lie his head, to come and be with his people, because everything else is unholy and impure. And one of the promises you're supposed to make is to donate your time and talents to the building up of the kingdom of God. So I was under obligation to do things for free. Do whatever I can. And I didn't care. I mean, it was that's all I knew.
Yeah.
I'm wearing the lens of everything I ever knew. I didn't know there were other classes I could put on and see some things. But it's not until you take those other glasses off can you really see, like with you growing up in assemblies. If we switch glasses, I could understand through your experience why what I'm talking about seems strange.
Yeah.
And if I tell, a family member who's strong LDS, they could not really comprehend seeing it from that way. But they might comprehend seeing you as, you're a good guy. You're almost there. Let's see what we can do to help him. Let's pray for him. It's the same mentality as Christians praying for, other people they don't think are Christian. We're always praying for people we don't think are Christian.
That's the truth. That's the truth.
Because our own little self-righteous thinking that we've created, our worldview. I don't think anyone has the same worldview.
No. So you get signed.
Mm-hmm.
Do you start touring?
I put together a small business. I put together an LLC called Stone Angel Music so that in the event the label fell apart, I could start my own label. And when Narada, they were successful at putting me on the Billboard charts. So the sales were good. And they established somewhat of a following outside of the Mormon faith. Because a lot of people in the Mormon faith were following me because a lot of the music I was doing was hymns. I loved the hymns, and so it was piano versions of the hymns. So that was attracting a lot of people familiar with those hymns. But with Virgin, they started to go to smooth jazz. Like Dave Koz and Kenny G, and I was like, I'm out of here. Because I can't do jazz. I love jazz, but mine's more cinematic, calm, relaxing. The purpose of it is to help create an atmosphere of the spirit. So that's when I left and I started building Stone Angel Music in Salt Lake City. I just started producing albums like any artist would and releasing them, and my audience just started to grow and grow and grow. And when you're an independent musician, you don't have a big budget. Pandora happened, I think in 2003, and this was 4 years after Narada. Pandora reached out to me because they'd seen that some of my music had been on the Billboard charts under New Age. So they said, can you send us whatever you have? We're starting a streaming platform, which was a whole concept. I was like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I sent it over to them, but everything, if you remember from Pandora, was thumbs up or thumbs down. And it was a genome project, which basically would then take your iPod and it would scan your iPod. So it pulled all the information from your iPod. And it would then tell Pandora the music you like. So then, if, say, you're listening to my song, it will generate other artists that sound like me. And in the beginning, that's great. Now, today, it's dysfunctional because my music's evolved. It doesn't sound like the old stuff. It's better. But at the time, it was thumbs up, thumbs down. So I relied heavily on, because I didn't have the money, people to actually approve of it. And it started to take off to where I was able to get good distribution and money coming in, because I never took out a loan. Money coming in to do the next record and to pay my bills. So, yeah, the career just started taking off, and then I started signing other artists that were doing instrumental music, a lot of classical musicians, and started producing themed records like What If Yo-Yo Ma did a hymn album? So I had an artist, Stephen Sharp Nelson, do Sacred Cello. And it was a bunch of hymns and like Homeward Bound and beautiful, like Simple Gifts, beautiful pieces. And he would go on to create a group called the Piano Guys, which is a very popular instrumental group today via YouTube and the explosion of YouTube. And then there was a guitarist who's just really well educated in guitar music, and so we did Sacred Guitar. So,
Yeah.
simple, right to the point. Mom can walk into the bookstore and go, you know what? I need some instrumental music to help my kids go to sleep. Or the man that may have just lost somebody that needs something to bring some spiritual nourishment. Mm-hmm. And it was clear on the cover what it was. And if you got the sacred cello, you would trust the sacred guitar. And then, of course, I had sacred piano. And we didn't really go with sacred violin or sacred trombone, but but that was kind of the gist of doing projects that were very clear and specific, so people would not have to try too hard. I wasn't going for artisty.
Yeah.
You know, it was, here's something to help you. Very clear.
Pragmatic.
I thought so.
Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah.
It worked. Yeah.
So let's rewind a little bit.
Okay.
Your friend dies. You're pounding on the piano. Some of the stuff resonates in your soul. All of a sudden, you're now performing. What was that journey like between there and then starting to get on stages in church and start to develop a little audience?
It was quick.
Really?
It was quick because...
Did you just re-pick up piano like that? Or
no,
did you take some lessons?
It's God. God just like... I had seen the movie Amadeus, of my favorite film next to The Godfather. And Mozart was so fascinating in that film, even though the movie is not a real biography of his life. He was a very godly man who went to church every day. I would say way too much. But that had such an impact on me that it was as though I would listen to him and then try to play what I was feeling through that. And there were other pieces I would listen to, and some sheet music from when I was 8 years old that was like hot cross buns, and I'd put that music back up and try to see if I could read and figure things out. But it happened so quickly because the following year, my senior year, they had what's called concerto night. And this was where all the students that were really well equipped to play Mozart or Beethoven or Chopin or Four Seasons, any of that stuff, they would have a performance at the end of the year of all their them with their music. And I was pretty cocky because I knew God gave me a gift.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be in concerto night. So I went to the music teacher, Jack Ashton. He was first violin of the Utah Symphony. Really laid back guy. And I go in to say, I'd like to try out for concerto night. He says, who are you? I said, well, I'm a student here. I just have never taken any of these music courses. He goes, I can't have you in the... He just laughed at me pretty much. He goes, well, why don't you play something? And I played this botched up composition I'd created that sounded like a Russian dance meets the Nintendo Princess Victory.
Yeah.
With a little bit of Mozart prettiness. And I played it for, he goes, well, that's very fascinating. The timing's all over the place, but do you have orchestration? Jeez, see what he was doing?
Yeah.
I'm like, I can get it to you on Monday. He's like, come back on Monday with this score and let's take a look at it. So there was another kid in the high school that had done it. He had written his own orchestra concerto for piano. And I reached out to him and we became friends. And I asked him, can you help me over the weekend? You know, I'll buy all the Mountain Dew and Twinkies.
Pizza.
We'll just totally go the Mormon route of tons of Mountain Dew, party it up. And
I thought Mormons didn't do caffeine.
Oh, you can do caffeine.
Really?
Yeah, you just can't do the coffee and the black tea. You can do herbal tea and all that stuff. That takes us down a whole other podcast of the Temperance Society, because the Baptist and everybody stopped drinking because women gathered and they needed power, and They had power in the temperate movement before they started voting. So, but yeah.
Okay. So Mountain Dew, Twinkies. You guys are working on this.
He scored the violins, the cello, the bass, a part for the French horns, flutes, a little timpani. And on paper, to me, it looked like, I don't know, Reformed Egyptian. It looked just different. So, anyways, I took it back, and Jack said, "Oh, you had Ryan help you." I said, "Yes." He goes, "Well, good, because Ryan knows what he's doing, and he'll guide you through this process, right, Ryan?" "Oh, sure, I'll help him out." So, yeah, within the next couple months, I rehearsed with the orchestra twice. It sounded like cats screaming and silverware falling. But it got to the point where it was ready to go. And so we had concerto night exactly 1 year after I started teaching myself to play. And it was something my mom would then print that program and put it in a scrapbook because it said Tchaikovsky, Beethoven, Cardall. Even though my piece was like not that great.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was the first time I'd ever performed in front of people. And I was nervous. And I remember Ryan, who had learned Russian. This is an unusual person.
Yeah.
Who had learned Russian. And I knew Jack Ashton spoke Russian. He knew that. At the end of the concerto in the manuscript, as he goes to finish, he turns the page, and in Russian it says, "Thank God there's no more."
How did he react to that?
Oh, he thought it was funny. He was laughing. He was laughing. It was a good memory. Yeah. That kind of was the gist of starting to play, and I was playing in Nordstrom's, and there was always a piano player in Nordstrom's in the 90s, you know, and I started advertising concerts, but I'd have to put it all on myself, and just started doing where I had paid concerts, but most of it was going around and speaking, being asked by an LDS bishop or an LDS stake president who's like the head of the archdiocese or mission president. I would go out and I'd perform the music and share my testimony.
How's your faith evolving over this journey?
I think my faith was getting more and more intense because as I was building my career, I also went into heart failure and was listed for a heart transplant.
Wow.
So again, that back to where we started with always thinking about the next life. The Mormon lens allows you to understand the full story. It's packaged perfectly in the narrative. So I knew what was going to happen when I died. I knew it. So there was a lot of comfort in knowing. And this, of course, was based on revelation, new canon, given through the presidents of the church who are prophets. And so if they receive, a revelation from God, it's going to be now part of the canon. And so a lot of the theology of the next life, you can find bits and pieces in the Bible, but it's a more broad imagination on what is written in the Bible to give clarity of what's next. So, yeah, so I didn't fear death. I just understood it could be the next day, anytime.
How old were you when you started going into heart failure and were on the list for the transplant?
I was 32, and at age...
Single, married?
Married. I married Ryan's little sister. Yeah. We'd later get a divorce after the transplant.
Really?
Yeah. But leading up to that, I would release music around the same time I'd have some big medical procedure. It fueled, like, for me, pain and suffering fuels success. It fuels projects and making sure they're done really well, because I may be gone the next day. So you kind of pour everything into it. But yeah, I was married. I had a daughter, my daughter Eden, and just went into heart failure. Was a candidate.
What does that look like for someone that's never been around something like that? What is heart failure, and how does it affect you day to day?
Well, I would say everybody in Holy Smokes ought to be fully aware of the heart, because cardiovascular disease and pulmonary stenosis and things like that are a direct result of, So this is why I've told everybody in Holy Smokes, make sure you go to your doctor once a year. You'll take your car in for an oil change, but God forbid you take your body, to get checked. And so for me, for most people that have congenital heart disease, you see a doctor every year. Sometimes it's every 3 months.
Yeah.
Sometimes you look amazing, and sometimes you just look horrible. It's up and down. It's all over the place. My childhood, all the way, with those surgeries leading up to heart failure, I was very familiar with the MRI, the CAT scan, the X-rays, every radiology program you can, the
echocardiogram,
iron infusions, living with a fanny pack of medications through a PICC line, oxygen, a big oxygen tank in the home with a 50-foot cord going up to an overstuffed chair where I was keeping a blog, and if my 3-year-old wanted to find me, she had to follow that cord. And if she wanted me to play with her and I couldn't, she'd pinch the cord. So, because my wife at the time was working as a nurse, so it was a very difficult period, and we had a lot of family help. But
living in Utah?
Yeah.
Close to family?
Well, when you have 8 siblings, and your mother also comes from 9, you got a lot of cousins. It's an infrastructure of
support.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the Latino community or the Italian community. The Mormon community sticks together and is there in such a profound way. I think that's the thing most people admire about it is community.
Yeah.
They're nice. They're nice. So, yeah, you're going through, I think everybody listening has had some type of medical challenge in life, their illness that's been scary, or somebody they know. Mm-hmm. Our good buddy John Anderson, who had a heart attack, and here he's back hanging out with the boys. Put a smile on his big face, but
he's a special human being. I love that dude.
He's so
I
right.
absolutely love that. My last 3 trips I've been out here, I've been trying to nail him down to get him on the podcast, and it just hasn't worked out because the dude travels a ton.
He's great.
But he is that is one I'm looking forward to, talking to him and his son to talk about the father-son dynamics in Holy Smokes. But
that is an interesting topic because there are a lot of sons that come and are part of it. And
especially here.
Yeah.
I've been around to a whole bunch of chapters all around the nation. Yeah. And this one really, Kay moving here was the big catalyst, obviously. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I've noticed that there is a strong father-son thing going on. And so this is pretty special.
I think, yeah. Mark Hugh Young and Brady Hugh Young.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a few. John Anderson reminds me of the Saturday Night Live skit about the Chicago Bears. Chris Farley banging his chest. They're like, it's just another heart attack. Just another heart attack. And then he's back. So, that's scary, though, for, when you're in that situation. And I didn't know if I was going to live or die. And they listed me, and I waited for months and months and months, and nothing was happening. I'd be in and out of the hospital with different major challenges, and Christmas 2008, they called me in because they had a heart. Basically means for me to live, somebody else is dead.
Yeah.
And how do you wrap your head around that?
Yeah. Yeah.
My brother Craig laid hands on me and basically said, look, because of the sacrifice of your donor, whoever that is, because they've laid their life down and agreed to be an organ donor, because of them, you're going to be able to live a little longer.
Yeah.
Because Jesus laid his life down, you'll be able to live forever. So that brought me the analogy and the perspective of Jesus understands.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that intimate clinging to Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, from the time of 14 where I was not going to make it, saying goodbye to my siblings after my third major heart surgery, I knew Jesus and he knew me early.
Yeah.
When I was a teenager.
Yeah.
All the other stuff in my life, in my faith and stuff was there, but Jesus I really, really felt like,
Yeah.
this is my Lord.
Yeah.
You know, this is who gives me comfort when the nights are dark in the hospital and everyone's gone and you got a PICC line in you and you're nauseated or things like that. He's got your back. And, you know, that was basically the gift my parents gave me. I got a lot of other stuff on top of that I would later work through. But in essence, that was kind of the start of my faith journey from 14, but really it hit clearer and clearer, waiting for my heart transplant and then getting the transplant. And then a lot of people, when they survive something and they have friends that don't make it, get into a survivor's guilt mentality.
Yes. Yeah.
PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
I went down this road of two things. One, my faith taught me that when you're depressed, work. Keep working. Stay busy.
Ignore it.
Yes. It's vocalized very well over the pulpit by Elder Jeffrey Holland, who's admitted he's got some depression. Stay busy. Keep working. And secondly, because I had agreed to donate my time and talents, plus the concept that Jesus is going to meet me halfway, I needed to just go out and tell the world that he is a God of miracles, because I was on an operating table. My heart was dead. They took it out. 50 years ago, put him in the ground now. But they took the heart of another young man. They put it in me and literally raised me from the dead. So I have the idea of Jesus resurrecting. Nobody knows we don't even know how the pyramids were built. You know?
Yeah.
So we're so naive in thinking Jesus couldn't accomplish, or there could have been a resurrection. It's too, with what they did to me, it just seems common sense. Easy. But, yeah, that whole experience was, you rely so much on God and your relationship with God.
So you're ignoring the survivor's guilt.
Well,
Not really.
No, I didn't think you
it.
go to therapy or anything like that. That's because you have priesthood leaders. You have church leaders. They talk with the Lord. They know the Lord. They have the gift of revelation by the Holy Spirit. and the priesthood they've been given. So you don't, in my mind, there are church therapists. There's quite a few, actually, and they were starting to do more and more of that. But why would I need it? I know Jesus. Well, why would I need any therapy?
Did things come to a head?
It did. I fell apart. I spread myself thin, and my marriage suffered, and I was very selfish on a crusade to try to convince everybody of Jesus. And ironically, the darkness, the Lord of Darkness, started to use that to just bring me down. And I didn't think I had any value. I also thought that I was continually making my wife at the time miserable. We'd never had things really run smoothly. There was always a problem with health, miscarriages, things that couples should work through and get closer together. But I was distant and grew cold and just went down a bad path. And obviously there's elements that, she...
Takes two.
Yeah, but I've always tried to just paint her as, because I love my girls, my daughters.
Yeah.
So I don't have anything negative to say about their mom.
Yeah.
But it's a dance. It's a dance. So I went through a divorce, and it wrecked a lot of relationships, and it rocked the LDS community because I was an established celebrity within that culture, and I had been entrusted with teaching people over the pulpit. Sometimes when men are given permission to teach over the pulpit,
Gets to their heads.
Power always goes to the head, and it's not that it was power, it was just I felt like I was part of like God's partner out there telling the world, but if it goes into a divorce, there's something seriously wrong with a system, because I didn't know what to do. I didn't have any answers. And when I was going through the divorce, the advice I was getting from church leaders was, it's going to be very hard, but you can fix this. It's going to be very difficult. But I never heard anyone say, Jesus can take care of this. Jesus can help you. That wasn't the idea. Mm-hmm. If I needed Jesus, I would bring him into it. Meanwhile, I was praying to my Father in heaven through Jesus Christ. But I didn't understand grace the way that I do now, or I didn't understand that it's okay to be completely broken and that God loves broken things.
How'd you get to that point?
Well, you go through, you lose your family, and you lose your family. You start to recognize, honestly, that period was such a blur to me, because for the first time in my life, I had a 4-chamber heart. I was getting oxygen to my brain unlike ever before. So I think it was more of a process of, I don't know if this answers that question, but Peter, the Spider-Man, he first gets bit with this superpower, and what does he do? He goes down this dark path. Not intentionally, but it's just the human nature. He went and he had the black spider suit. He was like a black widow or a black spider. And it wasn't until he started to work things through with the love of the woman, which I would say the love of Jesus, does he start to figure out there's power for good. Mm-hmm. So that, I would say that's kind of my transition through the divorce to, getting remarried and waking up from a deep sleep, I would say.
How'd you meet her?
Tina's fantastic. Some of the guys know her. One of the things that you do is you go on a cruise with a celebrity. So I was this in Utah. It was go on a cruise with me. So I pretty much had about 30 retired Latter-day Saints from Idaho and Arizona, and we were going on a cruise to Israel.
Yeah.
And then meanwhile, I met Tina separately. She was just there with her mother.
Okay.
On a cruise, and we met. I was like, "You're the only one on the ship my age." So
let's hang out and talk.
And we're on a boat, so you can't escape me. But no, it was mutual chemistry at the beginning, and I had learned that she worked at a mega church in California after working on Wall Street, and she had helped one of the pastors lose weight so he could teach a sermon at Saddleback Church, and his name is Rick Warren. So my wife had worked for him and was part of the Daniel plan with Dr. Amen and Dr. Oz. Raised Catholic, worked for Rick, and then she married this Mormon guy. And her friends all warned her about it. But, you know, love is love. You don't think about the other person's faith when you're fully in love and can see beyond all those things. But, and I, of course, was convinced because she didn't drink coffee or alcohol or smoke that she's a perfect candidate.
So you're trying to evangelize each other.
Yeah, I just needed her to believe in the Book of Mormon, which she didn't buy.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I still continued my journey, and we had a house where, in Utah, we had a house where on Sundays, you'd go down the street and to the left, I would be dropped off at the Mormon church, and then she would go right and go to Mass. Because it's hard to find non-denominational churches in Utah.
Yeah.
There's like one for every 40 LDS churches.
Yeah.
So we had a pretty good system.
Yeah.
And once in a while she'd come with me. It was interesting. It was frustrating. Because, man, I mean, this is what I was raised in. This is true. This is like, what? How can you not see it? You're a good person. Why is God not telling you by the power of the Holy Spirit that the LDS faith is true? You need to join so that we can get married, because the most important ordinance within the Mormon faith is temple marriage. Mm-hmm. If you don't have it, you will not be exalted. To get it, you need to qualify to go to the temple, which part of that is living that word of wisdom. So she was good there because she didn't drink, or smoke.
Yeah.
You also have to pay tithing. Mm-hmm. So you have to pay your dues to get exalted. And you have to believe that the leadership is the only mouthpiece on the face of the earth, like an infallible pope. An infallible pope that actually receives revelation for the entire world. So that's what you have to commit to that, and you have to be doing a couple other things. I thought she was a perfect candidate.
What happened?
Just she didn't buy it. Mm-hmm. She didn't buy it. She even met senior leaders, because I'm close with some of the senior leaders, and they tried to convince her to join, and she's like, "No, I'm good." She's like, "I have Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm good."
Yeah.
So.
Did your faith evolve at all?
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Man, where do you start? As a musician in Utah, I was attracted to Christian music. We didn't listen to a lot of like PC Talk or any of that fun stuff. It was more like Amy Grant. You know, we knew about Amy Grant. And then, you know, I started listening to Michael W. Smith, Andrew Peterson, Mercy Me, Third Day. And I just thought the music was so good. I was like, this stuff needs to be played on the radio here in Utah. Because on Sundays in Utah, you had a station that played all the Mormon songs. And I was on there, and Tabernacle Choir, and it was all religious. I was like, we should be playing some Crowder and some Mercy Me. And they finally started playing a little bit of Amy Grant and Felicia, a couple other artists. Andrew Peterson.
Yeah.
He had a song called Family Man. Trading your career in for a minivan. Great song. And then I met Steele Crosswhite. He was in a rock and roll band. And he had, when I first met him, he was an alcoholic, a womanizer, and sometimes he'd come home with glitter all over him from the strip club. And I would cross paths with him at the studio. I was doing my relaxing music. He was doing really some badass rock and roll music. And I wasn't cool, but I wanted to be around cool.
Yeah.
So his dad died, and his sister invited him to a small church plant that evolved out of Colorado called the Rock Church. And Bill, pastor, was doing this out of his house. And when Steele went, he's like, first he's like, he didn't want to go, but he went, and having been raised in some kind of church movement that wasn't LDS, he had a major born-again experience to where he let go of his entire music career. And Bill had him become the worship pastor. And they finally got into a building on 21st South in Salt Lake City by the train tracks. They got the speaker system from the Zephyr Club, which was a great club. We used to go and see like Dead Kennedys and punk bands, you know, good stuff, you know, Public Image Limited and, you know, Pearl Jam before it was Pearl Jam. So they had a killer sound system and Steele had his band. So it was rock and roll Jesus music. He made his first Jesus album and I thought it was amazing. Other Mormons thought it was like disrespectful to the spirit because there's no drums in church. It's all just him singing with the piano and orchestra. And that's fine. Some people like that.
Yeah.
But I was into it, and I saw the change night and day. From losing weight to no more drinking, no more smoking, his sexual addiction gone, meeting and falling in love with somebody. And I was like, why? How do you have a transformation like that? I've never seen anybody, even when I was a missionary, do a transformation like that was authentic. So I felt like he and I could connect on different ways. And so it kind of spurred in my mind the question of how is it that Jesus is able to help him? And of course, he was helping him to a point because he needed to be over on the winning team. But in addition to that, I started diving deeper into biblical history. And my biblical...
How old were you at the time?
I think I was 30, 38, 37, 38.
Okay.
I dove deeper into the Old Testament, or to the New Testament. And the story of the Bible that I was reading did not line up
With what you were taught?
with what I had been taught. There were elements of it, but it seemed like Mormonism was stretching ideas. For example, you know, in the Old Testament, Abraham took another wife, but he didn't take her. she was given to him by his wife, whose name was Sarai. Abraham's name was Abram. Mm-hmm. And of course, it was Hagar. So Sarai technically sex trafficked her maid to Abraham. And he committed adultery and had Ishmael. Well, then, of course, God comes and they repent, and her name is changed to Sarah, and his name is changed to Abraham. But in the Mormon teaching, that is the justification to Joseph Smith, because the question is, how did God permit more than one wife? And then other people like Lamech. Now, Lamech's, I think, is the only one that was, listeners can debate this, but I think Lamech was the only one that was actually authorized for some reason. But the rest of them, I'm starting to go, look, it's very clear here in Abraham that this was a sin. And God never really authorized anything. So it didn't line up. And I wasn't taking it too serious because I was like, we have the truth, so there's got to be some type of thing there. And then I went to Matthew 5. Matthew 5 is very clear on Jesus' role as the great and eternal sacrifice, that he is the fulfillment of the law of Abraham, that the covenant given to Abraham is fulfilled in Christ. And the prophets, all the prophets that existed to teach the law of Abraham, or the covenant of Abraham, that period was from Abraham through Moses all the way to Christ. And with Christ, he fulfilled the need to have a prophet oversee ordinances and things like that. In the Mormon faith, there are prophets today because in the theology it points back to it, and they're here to clarify and teach truth. And that's fine. We have pastors today and leaders today that can go through and decipher what's happening in our culture now and what's happening then to give us guidance. But in Mormon theology, it's more of a very bold approach. And there's a narrative. Also, most religions suffered with the internet happening because, you can go and find, where did the Mass come from? Normally you have to go to a library and try to sort through everything, but you can type in, where did the Mass come from? And then you can cross-reference to make sure the sources are pretty accurate. How did the Baptist movement start? How did the Seventh-day Adventists start? And if you're a Baptist, sorry to put you next to Seventh-day Adventists, but if you're like...
Yeah, every denomination under the sun.
There's a story. With Methodism, it's Wesley, Lutheranism. Luther, even though he didn't start the church, his followers did. Calvin and things like this. So what I was reading and what I was learning on the internet did not line up. And even Mormon scholars that were completely respected, professor from Columbia that wrote probably the most politically minded a book about Joseph Smith's life he is a Latter-day Saint, very respected, who also oversaw this massive project the Mormon Church was doing called the Joseph Smith Papers. They were trying to gather everything he ever said to a scribe or wrote in a journal or prophesied or any of that, all into one, in a couple volumes, and there's like all these volumes of whatever he said. But the guy that was on the board and responsible for all this came and said basically the narrative of Joseph going into the grove of trees and seeing God the Father and his Son, Jesus Christ, can't be sustained. It's simply not true. Because there were so many different accounts of that first experience. Over time, Joseph would in retelling the story,
add things, subtract things.
Yeah, clarify. In the beginning, basically, Joseph, what we know for sure is that Joseph was concerned about his soul because his father went to the Methodist church, even though he was a drunk and had lost favor in society. And then his mother was a Presbyterian. And so there was pressure in 1820 to basically be baptized. If you don't get baptized, you're going to hell.
Yeah. So
he was worried about his soul. He went into the trees in the forest by his home. Very poetic. And opened his heart to God. And at first he says that the devil tried choking him so he couldn't talk. And I don't know if that was added later or what, but he basically, when he opened up his heart to God, he had an experience that a lot of other people were having. Mm-hmm. He said he saw an angel and it felt like it was Jesus. Now, if they had just stuck with that, that's believable. We can all think of pastors that have gone up to a mountain and had a spiritual experience and felt like it's time to plant a church.
Yeah.
But Joseph, it was more detailed over the years. So the narrative simply couldn't be contained. And there were some other elements of the nephew of Joseph began to control the narrative. And his son, also named Joseph. So Joseph Smith, his brother Hiram, they were the ones killed in the jail. Hiram's son, who was a little boy, walked across the plains, 2,000 whatever, with his mother, and would rise as an apostle. Brigham Young brings him in. He would rise, and then he ends up becoming the president of the church around the turn of the 20th century.
Yeah.
And he had a cousin who was the son of Joseph Smith, who lived back in
Illinois.
Independence, Missouri.
Okay.
And he was the president of the Community of Christ Church, the reorganized LDS faith, the church that stayed behind. Joseph's wife, Emma, Joseph's mother, stayed behind. They didn't go with Brigham Young. So they had a narrative.
Very different.
That Joseph never practiced polygamy. Even though Emma privately had acknowledged it, she remained telling her son that his dad never did. So she was protecting that in some way. So that son, Joseph Smith III, went to Utah to basically try to get people to come back to the real faith.
Yeah.
Likewise, the two cousins met and they argued, debated, and the nephew, the cousin, who was, about to be the president of the church as an apostle, went out and got sworn affidavits from women who were married to Joseph. And that just wrecked Joseph III, and he went back, and he was an alcoholic and very emotional. I'm sure he felt betrayed, or he didn't know there's not a lot about it. So then the cousin who had found all those affidavits, his son becomes an apostle. And the original, one of the experiences Joseph had in the Grove, one of the retelling, his son had ripped the paper out and hid it.
And crafted a new narrative.
And they created a narrative. Yeah. But how do you teach millions of people in an hour what happened? You do have to come up with the narrative. Mm-hmm. That's what we do as historians and scholars. You have to put it in an essay form with the source and citations. Mm-hmm. So that's what they did, and they did a beautiful job, and I believed it. People believe it. It's believable. Because not only was he apparently a prophet, he had a book the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
Scripture, new scripture that answered all the questions of the American frontier in the 1800s. Where did the Native Americans come from? Why does it look like they are Israelites? Because they gather in circles and, worship. And why are there temple mounds in Missouri? Where did everyone come from? It was very good at explaining things. But it's one of the most powerful books on the earth, I think. And it does help people recognize that Jesus is the Christ.
Yeah.
It reemphasizes it. It's really powerful. And so, of course, you're going to read this at the time and you're going to go, or even now, this is Christian. Everything in here is about Christ. Mm-hmm. And so I can still read the Book of Mormon and go, this is great, what it's telling me. Like Jesus telling parables. Mm-hmm. I don't know if the parables were true, but it was to teach a
story.
So,
principle.
Yeah. So just dissecting the foundation that a lot of us were told not to go down that path, because if we do go down that path, we may find ourselves out of the faith. And if we were out of the faith, the plead from the apostle, Elder Ballard, was, where will you go? What will you do? It was scary.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it was like Adam and Eve walking out of the garden. Mm-hmm. Like, what's out there? But I didn't feel that because I knew Jesus. And I began asking him clearly, not what should I do, but Steele and other Christians have said, if you invite him into your heart, if you invite him in. To me, that was ridiculous because Jesus is a resurrected physical entity. Mm-hmm. He's not going to come into you. That's just stupid. Well, Matthew 5 and other gospel scriptures, it confirmed to me that Jesus is the covenant. Jesus is the temple. He's the chief cornerstone of the temple, and we're stones. Mm-hmm. And he's building a temple.
Yeah.
And he just invites us into relationship with him. So I was just getting further and further into my depression and grief and sadness over feeling betrayed by the history. Mm-hmm. The clarity of the Bible that confirms some things simply can't be true. But it was continually preached that the entire church's foundation rests on whether or not Joseph saw God the Father in Jesus. So when you come to a point and you see it from an intellectual standpoint, historical standpoint, criminology, the detective work, but more importantly, Jesus Christ and the four Gospels that are very clear in who he is, who he was, and who he's supposed and who he will always be. It's very clear. And if I can separate what I've been taught is the interpretation of the scripture, then I can read it through the Jewish lens, through the Muslim lens, through the biblical Christian lens. And I would take all those approaches. And I just couldn't deny it, but it's everything to me. It's my family. I love the LDS faith. I love everything about it. And so it's like the death. It's like it's died. Mm. It got cancer. I don't know. It just didn't. It started to die, and I was grieving it and mourning it. But I was depressed and wondering why. I'm doing everything it's supposed to, going to temple, all these things, but I'm not healing. So I finally was running on a treadmill, and I said, Jesus. I didn't say Father in heaven. I said Jesus, which I've never done. Jesus. It's been said that you can go into somebody's heart and change them. I don't want to just have you come in. I want you to come in the way you went into the temple the first time and turned everything over. Flip it on its head.
Wow.
Purge out.
That's one powerful last prayer.
Clean it out. Gut it out. Remodel. Reframe.
Wow. Whoa.
And within a week, my mind was different. There was a liberation in my mind of clarity.
What were the repercussions of outside of your mind in your life changing? Because I can imagine your family.
Yeah, it hurt.
Didn't take.
It hurt. It hurts me that it hurts them. It hurts me that it hurts my mom. It's everything to them. They're very faithful, and how can you not respect their level of faith and in their commitment? My dad knew how to stay married. So of course I'm off my rocker, Of course I'm like, I've gone down this dark road.
Did they blame your wife?
I'm sure there's some of it, but honestly, Tina has always told me to be faithful in whatever I'm part of.
Wow.
And at one point she told me, I liked you better when you were Mormon. Because you didn't drink. And you probably never had a cigar. And that was early on, and that was kind of like, oh man. But she was, be faithful, be faithful, be faithful. Because she's a very godly woman. They don't always see her as that. Because when somebody's outside the faith, you don't see them as like godly. She's not completely modest in her clothing, or she's a little flamboyant because she's a bodybuilder and does competitions, or she likes nice things. It's okay to buy a Louis Vuitton purse. She appears to be worldly. But what she is the embodiment of Christ saying, be fruitful and multiply and enjoy this world. Enjoy dispensation of grace. And so she's the epitome of the free thinking that Christ delivers that I admired, and it started to wear off on me. But she's not the one that is responsible for my decision making. And my family knows how much I loved the LDS faith. So I can't say anything negative about the LDS faith. But what I can say is that the mental clarity and freedom to love unconditionally only comes to those who invite Christ in to turn you from, Clark Kent in a suit and tie to Superman. So, sorry, I've been going on and on and on.
That's good. This is really good. Where are you now? Musically, professionally,
Oh, man.
spiritually?
I'm in a great place. Great season.
How'd you end up here?
Well, gosh, yeah, why leave Utah? Why leave Zion? We were driving through Nashville. I'd spoken at a American Art Association event in New Orleans, and her mother lives in Cleveland. So let's take a drive. We wanted to come through Nashville, never been. Mm-hmm. And, of course, spent a day at the Ryman, Broadway, when Broadway was Broadway. I don't know what it is now. It's like a puzzle of corporate chaos.
Yes.
So, but it was, Broadway was great. And I visited Johnny Cash's grave to pay my respects. Love Johnny Cash. Tried to find George Jones' grave. Mm-hmm. The sun was setting. I looked for an hour. My wife was in the car thinking I'm crazy that I want to look for the grave of George Jones. She's from East Cleveland, you know. She's into like Run DMC and Keith Sweat and George Jones, a hillbilly. So music I loved growing up. So I'm waiting, I'm looking, I can't. All of a sudden, the sun's starting to set behind me, and I look into the bushes, and there's a possum. And the possum's looking at me, and I'm looking at the possum, and I go, do you know where George Jones' grave is? And the possum turns, and I turn, and I see a big stone that says the possum. Because George Jones was known as the possum.
What?
Yeah, dude.
No way.
Yeah.
What?
It's crazy.
What?
Yeah. And then we driving up in Kentucky, and we look at each other, and we're both like, crap. We both knew. We were supposed to come back to Nashville. We didn't know why. So I said, why don't we, after Christmas, because this was Thanksgiving, why don't we come and get an extended stay for a month? Just see what happens.
Yeah.
There happened to be a music conference while we'd be there. So I signed up for that. And I came, and at the conference, the vice presidents of a couple companies, they knew who I was because of my streaming numbers. Mm-hmm. And there's always a guy listening in. And there was a manager listening in, and he asked me if I wanted to sell my catalog, the record label and all the music. We had like 500 songs in our catalog, mine. And so I actually started to entertain that. Mm-hmm. And over the next several months, through several different bids, so Sony and EMI and stuff, I decided to sell to Anthem Entertainment, a publishing company in Canada. They were the original record label imprint for the band Rush. Rush was my first favorite rock and roll band.
Yeah.
So it was a total full circle. I sold to them, and then we were going back and forth, and I realized I've got to sell my studio, the Steinway and Sons Premier Studio, recording facility, everything, and we just need to come here. Mm-hmm. So I sold the catalog. I transferred the ownership of the studio to my business partner. Well, work for hire business partner, the way I did things. Mm-hmm. And then set him up to make, I'm the bank. He makes payments to me. And then we were going back and forth, and we just realized, boom, let's stay in Tennessee. And for the first couple years, I was extremely lonely because I didn't know anybody. I knew people in the music business, but they just wanted, they just want to get a cut of whatever, and so they'll take you to dinner, and I've had $1,000 meals spent. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I started asking God for friends who are godly men. And a friend of mine from Toledo, Ohio, moved here. Matt Hammett, who's the lead singer of Sanctus Real at the time, wrote Lead Me. And he has a son born with the same congenital heart defect as me, named Bowen. He was born exactly 1 year after I got my transplant, September 9th, 2009. September 9th, 2010, he was born. So he moved here and I said, can we get together? And we started Extra Small Men's Group. That's what I called it. Just the two of us. Slowly I'd meet some other musician friends. And then I got introduced to Jamie Slingerland. Jamie
Great human being. I love Jamie. And I love Matt too.
They're great.
They're good dudes.
Like these are the type of men God put in my life. Jamie is like if the Lord was having a supper, he'd have Jamie. He'd have Jamie be like, I know you like the chimichurri and the steaks and everything. But through Jamie, I met Kay, and I started to meet so many incredible men. And the one thing I didn't realize was the South. Well, you're from Colorado, and Holy Smoke started in Colorado, but the South is the home of bourbon. Mm-hmm. And people are smoking cigars. And that's how the deals are done. But these are righteous deals. And the type of brotherhood that exists, the sincerity and the authenticity of building each other up was something that when I was in the LDS faith and was a priesthood leader responsible for men, those are the type of relationships I wanted and tried to facilitate. But here, people who love the Lord here, it happens naturally. And it's so intentional when the natural situation evolves to where you've got a bunch of guys, and the pipe and the cigar is that's just the talking piece to get, get things started. But it evolves into Jesus, so when it evolves into that, you just know
something special.
This is something special. Yeah. And it's pretty amazing.
Paul Cardall, this is so good. Let's get to rapid fire questions.
Rapid fire. Fire here.
When did you first try cigars?
Man, I thought cigars are so offensive. My first cigar was at Jamie's place. Jamie's place. Very interesting. Never had anything in my life. Never.
What were your thoughts?
Well, one of my great-grandfathers used to smoke a pipe. And, I read that in his journal, and I wanted to see what great-grandpa was up to.
Yeah.
So I tried the cigar, and right off the bat, I was coughing and doing it wrong, and there's a reason Pinocchio turned green.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about Pinocchio is everything was, it's all, what do you call it when it's tapered at the end, or turbo, all of the cigars are, they're not flat.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all torpedoes.
Mm-hmm.
The animator took precious time making sure they were all torpedoes. So it was an interesting experience, we'll just say that.
What's your favorite cigar?
I think there's one I really like that's La Dominican, but right off the bat, a Fat Bottom Betty.
I love Fat Bottom Betties.
I went to Deadwood once, and I was like, this is something Buffalo Bill or Wild Bill Hickok may have, there's the flavor at the tip, and it's a
great smoke.
Yeah, it's a good go-to after you've had something that's kind of, more blend wood. Mm-hmm. It's nice.
Your great-grandfather smoked pipes, do you? Have you?
No, I mean, I tried the pipe first, but when I was a kid, our neighbor, Mr. Gassman mowed the lawn in only a swimsuit and smoked a pipe. And I thought, man, the grass smells great and the pipe smells great.
Yeah.
But he was a sinner.
Where's your go-to place to get smokes?
Usually Papa P's or wherever the place is, or bum one off a friend.
What's your splurge cigar?
Well, it's the... I wish I knew the name of it. It's... I like a really expensive Olivia. That's the Torpedo. I don't know exactly which one it is. I'm bad at the names.
That's all good.
You know?
What's your favorite liquid pairing with your smoke?
Wilderness Trail.
Most interesting person you've met through cigars?
Oh, dang. That's complicated. I would say Jamie Slingerland. You know, and through him, so many, you know, Alan Phillips and Joel Rosier, you know, all these guys, there's so many. But I think Jamie, you know, from Matt Hammett to Jamie just opened my world of friendship, hospitality, and Christ-like love. You know.
For anyone listening, he's been on the podcast. Go search back in the feed. He's there, along with Matt Hammett.
Yeah.
Most memorable cigar experience?
I think the most memorable... The most memorable probably was that first time, because I could not believe that men were smoking cigars, having a little bit of bourbon, and expressing through their stories and conversation a testimony of Jesus that I longed for, that I thought I had, but I didn't fully know. I knew him, but I didn't like the way they communicated about him. Just, I can be Mormon. I know how to do that. But to live with full intention in relationships where you don't care what the other person does. Because the only place I could go where I felt like everybody was equal was in the Mormon temple, because everybody dressed in white. You don't know what everybody does. But you have to pay your dues and work hard to get there. This, know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So freedom in relationships, freedom to work out, freedom to let Jesus work out your salvation instead of you trying to pick up the pen and write it for yourself.
Non-cigar questions. Marvel or DC?
Oh man, I'm a Superman guy, but they have not yet had a good Superman since Christopher Reeve.
Have you seen the trailer for the James Gunn one?
Yes, but again, there's something about Christopher Reeve.
Star Wars or Star Trek?
Oh, Star Wars. Well, let's Star Wars before 1984. Star Trek movies, no TV. Yeah.
I just recently rewatched Wrath of Khan. That is
classic.
That is, in my opinion, I think one of the best sci-fi movies of all time.
That's better than Star Wars.
So good. It is so, the character development and just everything. It's brilliant.
They hold up.
It's brilliant, and it holds up. It totally
Search
does.
for Spock.
Yeah.
A resurrection story.
I saw that one in the theater. That was beautiful. I saw Wrath of Khan in the theater too.
Fantasy Island.
Into sports at all?
I didn't do too many sports growing up. I played baseball, but as far as like teams that I love, I still like BYU football. Good old BYU. You always have a good quarterback at BYU. This year, man, did I just do that? This year in 2024, they had a Jewish quarterback. So nice to see BYU kind of, from Jim McMahon to the
Steve Young
to all of them.
Yeah. What kinds of music do you love? You say you love all kinds of music, but what's really at the deepest?
Well, the band Rush, John Denver, Johnny Cash, Merle Haggard, Mozart, Beethoven. Good classic rock, Creedence, the band, Bob Dylan.
Love me some Bob Dylan.
Yeah, Harry Connick Jr. Just, I mean, how do you stop? You're talking to a musician.
Favorite food?
Oh, Italian. From Italy.
Favorite dish in Italy?
Favorite dish in Italy is it's linguine. Linguine with the clam sauce.
Dogs, cats, neither, or both?
We just got a puppy. It's a purebred teacup chihuahua. And it's only 3 pounds. It's not going to get any bigger.
Yeah.
5 months old. Yeah. Doesn't bark at anybody yet. It's not a yapper. My wife's got her trained pretty good.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nickname growing up?
Pollywog.
Pollywog.
Yeah. Purple Plum when I was in junior high by the kids, because the side effect of my art, I was purple. So Purple Plum, the girls gave me that, and I figured they were talking to me, so why not?
What's one unusual fact that few people know about you?
One unusual fact that they know about me.
That they don't know.
Oh, that they don't know. Oh. I think, I don't think people know how much time I spend investigating history as it pertains to faith. I like to dive deep into why certain behavior in religion, like non-denominational Christianity to me is the Wild West. Everyone is setting up a tent. And lo, here is Christ. Lo, there is Christ. And it's fascinating to me. I get excited trying different, it's all love.
Nice.
It's all love.
Are you a reader?
I am, but I don't read I don't sit down with a book unless it's a nonfiction book. You know, I've read books because it's required. You know, Scarlet Letter.
Do you have any favorites? Any favorite books that you will go back to besides the Bible?
Scarlet Letter. The Chosen by Khayyam Potok, about the relationship of a Hasidic Jew and a non-Orthodox Jew. The novel Dances with Wolves. It's amazing.
Do you have a life scripture? A scripture that really means a lot to you right at this point in your life?
Yeah. It's basically, for God so loved the world. I mean, it's kind of hard to compete against that. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth shall not perish, but will have eternal life. And see, I give you the King James Version, because that's my upbringing.
Name 3 things you're thankful for at this point in your life.
Oh, my wife, Tina, my children, and of course, my Lord. Yeah.
If you were stranded on a desert island with only one movie, what would that be?
Godfather 2.
Oh, yeah.
I'd say Castaway, but there's no instructions on that. And it's Tom Hanks.
If you could be any animal, what would you be?
Eagle.
If you could live anywhere, where would you want to live?
Nashville, Tennessee.
Fortunate that you're here.
You got to do what you want. That's the freedom.
What's your greatest strength and what's your greatest weakness?
I think my strength, it's facilitating a room so people can feel the Spirit of God, whether it's through music or a gathering of people. Mm-hmm. My weakness is, I think, obviously insecurity and feeling like I'm failing my parents and let down people who still have a tremendous amount of faith and belief in the narrative that the church put forth of Joseph Smith and other things.
Who's been the greatest influence in your life?
My dad.
Tell me about him.
My dad's father was an alcoholic. He abandoned my dad when he was 12, his siblings, and yet my father, there was a scoutmaster that came into his life, got him going in church, of course, grandparents. My dad became the opposite of his father. He's a faithful, loyal man. He's had a career in broadcast journalism with experiences people could only dream of. Mm-hmm. And he's always been by my side when it hit the fan with all my illness. And as a journalist, asking very clear and specific questions, challenging my medical team that I believe was hugely influenced in my survival.
Wow.
So, yeah, I would say my father.
Wow.
In his outdoors, taking us outdoors, teaching me to fish, camping, cabin. He's just a good man. And I've broken his heart. So, I think everybody's got a father situation.
How does the family relationship dynamics look like now? You still communicate with them, get together with them?
Yeah.
Because I've heard so many stories of when people leave the LDS church, or they leave Islam, or they leave whatever, what they were grown up in, there are families that cut them off completely.
Well, I'm 51 years old. I'm a grown man, can make my own decisions. My parents, your kids will always be your kids. But it is what it is. And there's nothing, we keep in contact. I live here, I go in town. We communicate all the time.
That's good.
We share a cabin. We have, my dad's, it's going to be his 80th birthday this year. We're organizing an event for him. So I'm sure my mother's had many tears and my father's been praying for me, and they'll occasionally ask me if I'm coming back. And every time it's, if Jesus tells me to come back, I will come back. And that's a very honest answer, because I can stand before God and go, either you deceived me or you didn't.
Yeah.
So I think time always heals. And then there's always that hope. But you got to live life with hope. Hope that your kids will do this. Hope that your family does this. So,
Who's the first person you think of when you hear the word successful? Success means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
the most successful person, I would say, gosh, I would say my grandmother, Mona, my mother's mother, lived to 100.
Yeah.
Had 10 children, 9 that lived. Each of them had 5 to 8 children. So a huge posterity. She spent most of her life writing birthday cards. And never said anything negative about another person, served selflessly, facilitated a room for God's Spirit, and faithful to her husband, faithful to her children, faithful to her beliefs, and I think she's the epitome of success. Grateful, grateful, grateful. Yeah.
What do you do for self-care, to rest, to recharge?
I go to the mountains. We have a cabin. I go to refuge a lot. Listen to music. Watch TV. Watch a show, binge a series or something. That's how I can decompress. Yeah.
How do you want to be remembered?
That he loved his wife and he loved his kids. That his wife thought he was a nice guy, and that his kids said he was a great father. That's it.
All right, last three. What does Holy Smokes mean to you, and how has it contributed to your spiritual journey?
It's pure fellowship, recorded. That's pure fellowship that Paul talks about. So every opportunity I get to be around other men, to learn from them, my own faith grows. What was the next one?
How has it contributed to your spiritual journey?
Oh, it just enriches me. I feel loved. I feel nurtured, and I feel vindicated. Because everybody goes to different churches, but the same Spirit rests on it.
If you could have a holy smoke with any three people throughout history, living or deceased, who would they be? Can't name Jesus.
Joseph Smith,
Interesting.
the founder of Mormonism. Elon Musk, to talk about how he would have done the Pinewood Derby. And I want to say Vivian Thomas.
Who?
Vivian Thomas. From Vivian Thomas and Dr. Blaylock from Tennessee performed the first heart surgery on a child at Johns Hopkins, and Vivian Thomas was black, so he could not go to medical school. But he snuck in the books and eventually found his way with Dr. Blaylock at Vanderbilt. And it was really him teaching this white doctor how to perform a successful surgery. So today you have a picture of Vivian Thomas in St. Hopkins, or in Johns Hopkins Hospital, as an honorary doctor. So it'd be interesting to hear from him, because I'm alive because of
Wow.
a guy like that,
Wow.
who, despite segregation, snuck books. Yeah.
Wow.
I don't think people know that.
No.
There's a great movie, HBO made it, called Something the Lord Made. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
I'll check it out.
Yeah.
Last question. If we were to meet 1 year from today, and I got a bottle of that, what was that bourbon whiskey that you said?
Wilderness Trail.
Wilderness Trail. What are we celebrating?
Oh, man. I think we're just celebrating gratitude that we get to breathe another day. And if that means being around some smoke Don't inhale. It's a cigar. Just inhale the goodness that God is continually doing despite the pain that each of us feel inside. Yeah.
Paul Cardall, thanks for being on the Holy Smokes podcast, dude.
Say Paul Cardall 5 times real fast.
Paul Cardall, Paul, yeah. Yeah, okay, all right.
Parents are messing.
Hey everyone, I wanted to announce that we have Holy Smokes gear. That's right, we have swag. We currently have hats, shirts, stickers like for your vehicle or your travel humidor, magnets, even branded bourbon glasses for a limited time. Go to holysmokes.club and click on the shop tab. That's holysmokes.club. I'm super proud of the shirts. They're made with Bella canvas shirts that are soft and incredibly comfortable. The hats fit wonderfully, which can be a problem for those of us with big noggins. We plan on having a lot more to offer, like Guayabera shirts, additional t-shirt designs, beanies, polos, hoodies, cigar accessories, and much more. Check it out. And even if you don't make a purchase now, be sure to sign up for that email list, as I've thrown a couple big discount coupon codes for those exclusively on that list. So click the shop tab at holysmokes.club. Thanks.